Now, the French Senate is set to vote on whether to inscribe abortion rights into the constitution. While the practice isn't under threat in this country, there's no guarantee its passage will be smooth. Vedika Behel reports.
With 493 votes to 30, the French National Assembly last month overwhelmingly approved a bill to enshrine the right to abortion in the constitution. As the bill moves to the Senate's upper house for debate, some in the Conservative-controlled Senate may try to put the brakes on the reform. Dominated by the right and centre, the upper house would have to validate the text verbatim, and the Senate majority remains sceptical about the wording chosen, which refers to abortion as a guaranteed freedom. Senator Philippe Bas believes this could lead to terminations after the legal time limit, currently at 14 weeks. And the Senate president feels the move is unnecessary.
Abortion is not under threat in our country. If it were under threat, believe me, I would fight to maintain it. But I think that the Constitution is not a catalogue of social and societal rights.
The move came after the US Supreme Court in 2022 overturned the right to abortion for Americans. But the road to a constitutional amendment is arduous and doesn't guarantee it to pass into law. If passed in the Senate, it would also require a 3/5 majority vote in the French Congress meeting in Versailles, a body composed of both chambers of parliament. According to French pollsters IFOP, 86% of French people support this constitutional revision. And if it eventually passes, France would become the first country in the world to make abortion a constitutional right.
We can now bring in Anna Błuś, researcher in women's rights and gender justice Europe at Amnesty International. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 today. Is it necessary to enshrine abortion rights into France's constitution, given that the practice is not under threat in this country?
Thank you. I think we have seen, based on what happened in the USA, that actually this move to give stronger protection to abortion through its inclusion in the French Constitution would make a lot of sense. Because perhaps in the US as well, and perhaps in many different countries, the perception has been or was until the latest developments in the US that it is a right that is not going anywhere, that is fully protected, that was so hard fought for, that we have nothing to worry about. But in fact, to see how devastatingly easy it was in the US to threaten that right and the impacts, the immediate impacts on so many people since the latest change, I think it does show us how much more strongly we should, in our region in Europe, but also beyond, strive to protect this right. So it does make sense to enshrine it in the French Constitution, indeed.
I understand what you're saying, but if we look at the pro-life movement in the United States, it's always been very strong compared to other parts of the world, especially here in France. If we look at previous elections in this country, obviously things like immigration, the economy, these are all hot-button issues. Abortion is something parties never seem to touch.
I have to disagree with that to an extent, because what you have seen in France as well is, for example, attacks on organizations such as Le Planning Familial over the past few years. In this most recent debate in the French, different chambers of the French Parliament, you could also see that, in fact, the anti-choice movements are much stronger than perhaps expected. It is also something that touches on other countries in the region. So France is, in fact, not the only one, I believe, that will be affected by, hopefully, this positive change. If you look at, for example, Poland or Malta or Andorra, that have much less protection for the right to abortion. In fact, it's very strongly restricted in these countries. Hopefully what happens in France inspires both the lawmakers in these countries, but also activists who really have to fight some strong obstacles and often face prosecution, for example, criminal prosecution in Poland, for their activities for trying to assist people in accessing this human right. You can really see that.
I want to
what
ask
is
you about the
happening.
Poland question, because we do have a new government that's come into Poland that is looking at loosening the very extremely tight abortion restrictions that have been put in place. Do you think that enshrining abortion rights into the Constitution is a way to safeguard abortion for future generations, given that every election we could have this swing to the extreme right or what have you?
Yes, I think it could be one possible solution to more strongly enshrine this right and protect it better for women, girls, and all people who can get pregnant. In Poland, indeed, like you say, we have a new government. The new authorities seem to be supportive, at least to some extent, of changing these laws, or at least that's what the politicians have been telling people campaigning for this, and just regular people, trying to access their human rights in their election manifestos. So it's really now a test for them to see, do they commit to their promises? And indeed, enshrining this right in national constitutions could give them stronger protection than, like you say, having this debate with every change of government, with every election.
Obviously, a change of government can bring about a whole host of issues. But recently, something we saw in the United States from the state of Alabama, where the Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos should be considered children, something that was quite extreme, that even some Republicans were taken off guard. Given that how far courts can go, what can you do to protect access to abortion in these scenarios?
Yes, that is an extreme scenario, like you say, and something that I think caught many people off guard. And I think, like you said earlier, perhaps these kind of constitutional protections are in fact something that could be an inspiration to other countries in Europe. That example from Alabama is absolutely extreme indeed. But even if you look at Europe, in fact, I think a lot of people don't realize that in many countries in this region, for example, the UK or the Netherlands or Germany, abortion is regulated for under criminal laws. And it's actually only permitted in very specific circumstances. In all other circumstances, accessing an abortion is in fact a crime. So perhaps in practice that is not being pursued to a great degree, but still it is concerning how easily it would be for indeed lawmakers, but also through legal and litigation strategies and challenges to restrict these laws even further in several countries in Europe. So it's actually not just the US that has potentially these extreme situations and potential for huge rights violations.
Anna Błuś, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much.